The fifth chapter of C.S. Lewis's Four Loves is on charity, and C.S. Lewis speaks about how our natural loves can rival the love of God, this divine love of charity. And man has a natural tendency to divinize the natural loves, and C.S. Lewis says, although natural loves are unworthy to take the place of God by the fact that they cannot even remain themselves and do what they promise to do without God's help. That's from page 118. So without charity or divine love, the natural loves either vanish or become demons. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14 through verse 26, Jesus is talking about how natural love that becomes inordinate rivals our relationship with God. And Lewis explains that inordinate love of a fellow creature is not a quantitative term, because we can never love any human being too much. Rather, in page 122, he says, it is the smallness of our love for God, not the greatness of our love for man, that constitutes this inordinacy. And I think that's a very good way to look at it. That it's the smallness of our love for God, not the greatness of our love for the man, that constitutes the inordinacy. So, C.S. Lewis corrects St. Augustine's misguided conclusions. This is his opinion, but misguided conclusions after the loss of his friend. Augustine concludes that our happiness should not depend on something that we may lose, such as another human person. He says that we should only give our heart away to God, because he will never pass away. And Lewis explains that this conclusion is not Christian, rather it's closer to a Stoic apathy or Neoplatonic mysticism. It's not charity. Our God, Jesus, wept. He loved. And the life of the Christian is not an insurance against heartbreak. Christ himself experienced forsakenness. In love there is no safe investment. To love you must be vulnerable. And the most striking passage in this chapter was on page 121, at least for me, where he says that the only place where we can ensure our heart will not be broken is ultimately in hell. And he says, here it will not be broken, it will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. And the question is not if we are loving God or the earthly beloved more, rather it's to whom do we yield our will? So to whom do we yield our will? If our natural loves are hurting our soul by holding us back from following Jesus, then we must be willing to hate, to reject the suggestions or the temptations of the devil. So when love for an earthly creature comes between us and our obedience to God, to follow his will, we need to reorder our natural loves. And the best practice is to order our natural loves and keep them in order from infecting our relationship. So C.S. Lewis advises friends and lovers to come to a prior agreement that God comes first. And really, charity is what enables us to do this. It allows us to order our natural loves and invites us to love what is not naturally lovable. And really, divine love perfects our natural loves. He says, comparing it to the incarnation, charity doesn't dwindle into merely natural love, but natural love is taken up into, made the tune, an obedient instrument of love himself. That's from page 134. So God invites us to transform our natural loves into divine love every time we meet frustration and realize that natural love is not going to be enough. We need grace to tolerate and to forgive. So in chapter 6, two themes struck me the most. The first is how our supernatural love of one another, in which we receive charity for our fellow man. And his discussion on how we need this love, even though not necessarily want it, is very powerful. He says, we want to be loved for cleverness, beauty, generosity, fairness, usefulness. The first hint that anyone is offering us the highest love, being charity, is a terrible shock. I don't want your charity. I don't want your pity. Love me for my beauty, my fairness, my cleverness. So I completely agree with Lewis. It's so easy to give charity, but so hard to receive charity. Charity is hard to receive because it relies not on our own attraction, but on our neediness. A state that we quickly avoid, out of etiquette or pride. We're scared to embarrass the other rather than meet their need, and this can take on extreme cases. One of my schoolmates in high school lost his father because he refused to interrupt the conversation while he was choking. And sometimes it is uncomfortable to ask someone if, I know that's an extreme case, but sometimes we can take it to extremes, and it is uncomfortable to ask someone if they need help. In fact, one day at Mass there was a lady who was crying the whole time, and I really felt the Holy Spirit the entire time asked me to speak to her after Mass. Hesitantly, I touched her shoulder and asked her if I could help her in some way, and she was really shocked, and she turned around and quickly said, I'm okay. What is shocking is how well we go through the motions during Mass, call each other and brother and sister, shake hands, pray for each other, but how easily we become focused back on our own and forgetting the people we encounter at church. And this lady, like all of us, was not used to a stranger noticing her needs, even at church. And she did later on turn around actually and smile and thank me for having reached out. So finally, the other passage that stood out to me since I read the book in high school, I've always loved this passage, is the discussion on whether particular love relationships worked out on earth would continue to have any significance in heaven. And the conclusion Lewis left a stamp in my heart, because it's a motivation to form everlasting friendships centered in God, in having all that is not eternal is eternally out of date. So having a friendship rooted in God is going to allow that friendship to be eternal and to never go out of date. Thus, if we want our relationships to continue and have them in heaven, we need to work hard on earth to invite love himself to assume this relationship and to transform our natural love into a divine love so that we can have that friendship eternally.